Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume.
And I'm Scott McCandless. It is the week of November 3rd, and this is your Monday briefing. It is day 34 of the federal government shutdown, while Congress searches for a path forward to fund the government for FY 2026. The Senate is back in session this week, but the House hasn't met since mid-September.
And while there are a host of other issues on our radar, we're going to start with the obvious. Tuesday, November 4th is Election Day. Joining us to break down what to watch and what the results could mean for tax policy are Rohit Kumar and Todd Metcalf. Rohit, Todd, welcome.
Thanks for having us. Yep.
All right, so this first question is for both of you. Rohit, I'll start with you. That we're going to get into the details of the election, but I would like for you to do a little perspective for our audience, which is what is so important about this election? What are the implications? Rohit, why don't you start first?
I mean, the actual elections, the ones that are sort of getting the most attention, New York mayor, governor of New Jersey, governor of Virginia, and Proposition 50 in California, of those, Proposition 50, clearly because it's a redistricting matter, has some sort of broader federal implications. The rest of it, though, is mostly about, to borrow from my 15-year-old, the vibes. Like, what is the sense of the populace? Are they happy with the way Republicans have been running Washington, D.C.? Are they unhappy? Both, all the races, maybe less so New York, but certainly the governor's races have been to some degree nationalized. And this is sort of like a referendum on governance. And it's often the case, and we've seen this repeatedly over time, one party sweeps, and then you have these off-year elections in New Jersey and Virginia. And typically, and this is sort of what the polls would suggest, the party that is not in power fares well in those gubernatorial races. So Governor Youngkin gets elected after Democrats have total control, and hence, sort of Spanberger in Virginia is favored in the polls. Now we'll see what happens, but favored, and that's not a surprising development. It actually would have been more surprising if she hadn't been leading the polls, just given the sort of structural features in which this election is happening.
Todd.
I mean, I agree with everything he just said. I think that, how these elections have always been important or relevant, and why they have seemed relevant is really a sort of a bellwether to Rohit's point. Like, okay, because there have been circumstances where Republicans were in charge of the federal government and a Republican did win the governorship in Virginia, as an example, to sort of say like, okay, we're okay with how things are going. But if it happens in the reverse,
right,
as with Youngkin, as in, some other past elections, that it's viewed as an indicator. But, as we all know, there are, 10,000 news cycles in a week. So the fact that this is happening a year before, maybe a bellwether, but it's not like the strongest signal of like, oh, the world is coming apart. We have to reevaluate everything.
Yeah, but it tends to be, even if it's expected, it tends to be a signal to the party that's in power, like, might be time for a reset. Like, the public is not loving this. And so you need to think differently about how you're going to prosecute the mission over the course of the next year, lest this repeat itself to the extent that, there is this pendulum swing in the other direction. Yeah.
And I just want to point out quickly for our audience that we will be having an episode following the elections on Wednesday to see if the vibes panned out.
Okay.
So,
So Rohit, let's pick up the thread with regard to the Tuesday elections. Are there any standout races, specific things you're looking for across the nation or in the races that we're having?
Yeah, the two things that I'm going to be paying most attention to, one is probably most important in my mind is Proposition 50 in California. That's the constitutional amendment to allow Democrats in California to redistrict the state. This is sort of in response to Texas, the theory being that if Texas can draw, as it has, potentially 5 new districts for Republicans, of course the voters will have to have a say on that. Can Democrats in California draw an equal number of additional districts to elect House Democrats to kind of cancel out the Texas change? This requires a constitutional amendment. The overwhelming expectation, and I was in California last week, is that this is going to pass. The proponents are vastly outspending the opponents. I think Republicans have not quite given up, but more or less signaled we think this is going to pass. But that will have real consequence for control of the House post-2026 midterm elections. So that's probably number one on my sort of depth chart. Number two is the New Jersey governor's race, only because of the other things happening. That's the one that I think is going to be closest, where if there's going to be a surprise, and the surprise here would be that the Republican wins, it's most likely to happen in New Jersey. It's not going to happen in New York City mayor's race. And it would be very surprising, borderline shocking to me, if the Republican won in Virginia, just given the state of the polling, the makeup of the state. Trump showed a fair bit of strength in New Jersey in 2024, I think a surprising amount to many commentators. So it's sort of interesting to see does that trend continue, or was that a kind of one-time flash in the pan kind of thing?
I mean, sort of related to Prop 50, the other thing I think I'm sort of paying attention to is what happens in the Virginia Assembly races, because Virginia has signaled, or the Democrats in Virginia have signaled, that they would also like to sort of join the redistricting, mid-decade redistricting parade, and if they take sufficient control of the state legislature in Virginia and have Governor Spanberger as the ultimate sort of signer or vetoer as governor, then I think, that's another, and so California's responding to Texas, maybe Virginia's responding to Missouri and Ohio and other places around the country that have done this. Again, I'm concerned about the gerrymandering debate, period. But that's just another example of like, okay, if you can do this, we're going to do this too, and where does it end?
Yeah, this does feel like a game of anything you can do, I can do better.
Exactly.
So when we turn to the shutdown, tomorrow it will be day 35, which will be the same amount of time as the previous longest shutdown. What's the status? Is any needle moving one way or the other?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think that there have been lots of signals in the last few days that, some Democrats seem to be ready to okay, we've made our point. The insurance prices have gone out. Everybody knows what their premiums are going to be. Everyone knows about the pain there. The SNAP benefits expiring, affecting 40-some million Americans and their food security. Can you afford groceries? I mean, so I think there are Democrats who are sort of saying like, okay, we've made our point. Now let's get serious about finding an off-ramp. And so I think that we're moving in that direction. I don't know how quickly we get there. But I do think that there have been some signals that maybe we don't need to continue. Setting this record isn't exactly something that you want to put on your resume probably. And so I think that they're moving in a direction of trying to find an off ramp. But now that's in the Senate too a little bit. You've heard a lot less of that from the House. Not that the House necessarily matters, but the deal that's cut in the Senate obviously has to pass the House. And so, that's where, I'll defer to Rohit on this, but that's where I think, the president has got to get involved. And so far, he hasn't been the most interested party in this.
I think the order of operations here is a deal perhaps emanates from the Senate. The Senate is doing what the Senate does, which is that rank and file members are starting to have conversations. The Senate likes the gang terminology. Gangs get together of rank and file members, try to broker an agreement. That agreement has to pass muster with the leadership of the Senate, so Senator Thune, Senator Schumer, but ultimately needs the blessing of the president in order to be able to proceed. And it's that blessing of the president that is the unlocking feature with respect to the House. Like the House is not going to, House Republican Speaker Johnson is not going to put something on the House floor that doesn't have the backing of the administration, but it's not even probably going to get out of the Senate unless it has the backing of the administration. So I think the only scenario where something gets to the House is where it's obviously gotten Senate leadership buy-in, presidential buy-in. That doesn't make the House passage a foregone conclusion, but you kind of like your odds at that point.
Right.
Well, maybe we can tie this all together with a final question. Maybe Todd, to start with you and then finalize with Rohit. What relationship, if any, might there be between Tuesday's elections and an off-ramp for the shutdown?
I think honestly not much, unless there's a big surprise, unless everything sort of is backwards from what the polling is showing, and that might, which would mean Democrats have sort of lost some places and somewhere the places they expected to win. That might cause them to accelerate this off ramp that I think they're already talking about. But I think that but I think as a general matter, if they go as expected, it's not going to have no effect, but it doesn't have an amazing effect, because I think that the shutdown conversations are really about the broader country. I think that for some Democrats, if Abigail Spanberger wins and Mickey Sherrill wins, they will say, okay, what we did no harm. And maybe it helped them. I don't know. But it didn't do any harm. But that doesn't mean we don't want to get back to governing. So I don't think the effect is going to be great.
Okay.
Yeah, look, as a structural matter, nobody that's on the ballot tomorrow or Proposition 50 in California has any ability to change the trajectory of the shutdown. These are not members of Congress. This is not the executive branch. The players are the players, and that's not changing no matter what happens tomorrow. The one place where it might help is the mere fact that the election has happened. And so to the extent that, in the following way, to the extent that some deal makers or some deal manifestation is being held back by the desire not to upset a political base that then might not turn out, in the elections. Once the election has happened, irrespective of outcome, having that in the rearview mirror means you can cut a deal. Deals by their very nature anger the base because the base is not deal oriented. And you have a year before the midterm elections to re-energize the base. So just the fact that it has happened, to the extent that depressing the base turnout in these elections is in any way inhibiting a deal, the election happening will free that up and make that less of a concern.
Terrific. Well, Todd, Rohit, thank you as always for your great insights. Appreciate being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. We also want to note the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on Wednesday on the legality of tariffs put in place under the IEEPA authority that the Trump administration is putting forward. You can also find more on that in a recent episode linked in these show notes.
And you'll find Rohit and Todd back here on Wednesday to analyze Election Day. You won't want to miss it. We appreciate you spending this time with us. Have a great week.